it's already been 6 years since we did this last underlit countertop project. Just wanted to show you guys it's still looking great, still working great. In this video, we're doing a really similar project, similar materials, but this time we're going outside. Compared to the island, this project's a lot more involved. More angles to contend with. I've got some cutouts. Grill island itself is built with steel studs. It's stuccoed over that. I decided to go with plywood to put under the LED panel. I primed it, I painted it. It's really going to be weatherproof. It's going to hold up over the years. And the other thing I did, because this is a grill area and it really should not be near any combustible materials underneath, I did put in some sheet metal throughout this entire section. I've already got the electrical work pretty much done here. The way this works is the AC comes in through these two switches. The main controller for the LED panels is this dimmer. It's actually a Wi-Fi smart dimmer that I can control with a smartphone. And then I've got a switch right in front of that, so I can just turn off the smart switch if I don't want to leave that on for prolonged periods of time. The AC comes out and it goes down into these LED drivers, and these LED drivers basically take the 120 volts coming in from the AC circuit, put out 12 volts going up to the LED panels. And the reason why I have two drivers here is because this project calls for somewhere between 46 and 48 panels, and each driver can handle up to 24 panels. Red and black wires coming out of the bottom. And then they need to go through a fuse, so there's two wires there. Inside that gray box on the right, you've got two fuses, and then the DC wires will go up. I hooked up one of these SLABlites temporarily just to make sure all the electrical is working, and it is working pretty good. You can see if I just hit the on button there, panel came on. There's a dimmer control here, so I can turn it down, turn it back up, and again I can do that with my smartphone, so that's going to be a lot of fun. It's working really great. All right, it's time to get started here, but before I can do any installation I need to do a little bit of planning, because it's really important to figure out the layout ahead of time. With these LED panels from SLABlite, there are certain considerations you need to keep in mind when cutting it. So the LED strip is along one edge. It's on this edge where the wires are, and you can see a little bit of a white strip here. And the light is actually shining this way. And it's okay to make cuts anywhere down here, but when you're cutting along the line where the LED strip is, there's some very specific cut points. So if you can avoid cutting the LED strip at all, that's really preferable. If your layout requires that you do need to cut into the edge with the LEDs, then you really want to refer to this guide, because it provides some recommendations on where it's okay to cut. The strip is made up of 9 groups of 3 LEDs. And if you happen to cut into any one of those groups, then all 3 of those will fail to light. The most challenging part about this layout is going to be this 45-degree angle over here. I think I have an idea how I'm going to do that, but I'm going to figure out for sure when I get a little bit closer. Next thing I need to do is figure out how I'm going to run the wires. And with the LED strips over here on the left, the wires come out on the bottom edge here, and this is going to be my first panel, and then I'll route down this way to pick up panel number 2, and then I'll route across here to pick up panel number 3, which is going to go here, and then this is going to continue as kind of a square zigzag pattern going this way until I get over to the sink, and then I need to do something differently. As a next step, I started laying out the panels so that I could draw a line for the routing mark. So I followed my square zigzag, and you can see it coming around this way. But I did need to change the plan a little bit back here, because in this corner where I start to get into the angles, I want to have the LED on this side along the edge of the sink, so that the light direction is going back towards this wall. Well, I've got the lines drawn and I'm ready to start routing. I'm using a 1/4 inch bit, and the depth is set to about a 1/4 inch as well. Alright, the routing turned out pretty good, but before I go any further, I'm going to apply a coat of paint. Okay, painting's done, and I'm ready to move on to the next stage of this, which is the beginning of wiring and putting in the first couple of panels. I already ran the wire from down below that goes down to the LED driver. For the connectors, I'm going to be using these solder and seal connectors. The neat thing about these connectors is that they provide a really good solder joint, and then they also weather seal around the insulation. And the way it works is you insert the wires in both ends, and then in the center there is solder that's going to melt. I use a heat gun to melt it. I did a connection earlier just to kind of make sure this was going to work, and it worked great. And the reason you see 3 wires there is because you're going to have the power coming into the panel, and then the power going out to the next panel. Something that I noticed about these connectors is that the sleeves on either end are different sizes. They're designed for 3 wires. You always want to use the fatter end for the 2 wires, and they fit in there nicely. And then use the skinnier end for the single wire. Got my heat gun here. Okay, seems like that worked pretty well. I did a pull test on both the connections, and it seems very tight. Light's still working, so we're ready to glue this one down. And I'm using this Gorilla Glue heavy duty adhesive, but I'm not going to use much. I don't think it needs much to hold it down, because the weight of the stone is really going to do most of that work. So I'm just going to put a little bit in a few spots. I've got my hot glue gun here that I'm going to use to tack the wires down a little bit. Put a little bit of weight on there, and I'm ready to move on to the next one. After struggling a little bit with that first connection, I'm going to make a slight modification on the routing, and that's because I want both of the connectors to be able to sit side by side. So I need to widen the groove right here where the connection point is going to be. Otherwise I have to make one lead really short, and that just made it a little bit too short to work with. So I'm going to route out extra spacing in all these areas where the connectors are going to go. Okay, this one should be a little easier, have a little more room to work with. Alright, I got 4 in, no problem so far. I got various weights, just kind of hold them down while the glue sets. We'll move on to the next section. Made some good progress today. Got 8 in, plus got started on the 9th. This one's not attached yet because I got to cut it. Ready to make my first cut. Wired it up temporarily just to make sure it works. good. One thing to be aware of is these panels come sealed and waterproof. So after you cut it, you need to reseal the edge that was cut. And I'm using this Red Devil clear sealant. It goes on white, but it dries clear. So you want to put a good bead on here and then make sure you really seal all the edges. And that takes about 24 hours to cure, but so I can go ahead and keep working. Well, I made some good progress here, but once I got back around this corner behind the sink into this area with all these triangles, I realized I really better be careful about the layout. And I decided to make some templates. And fortunately, the SLABlites come with this square styrofoam packing material, and these are just about exactly the same size as the tiles, and I can cut those with scissors. And I did that, and I figured out the directions for the LEDs and came up with a solution that I think is going to work pretty well. Next step is to actually start cutting all these triangles and wiring it up. Cut out the triangles and some of the other little pieces, and then started working my way to the right here. And then had to figure out the layout for this area here, which is kind of like a transition. So next step here is to finish the cuts, make sure everything fits, and then work on the routing of the channels for the wires. I finished the triangle area, and now I'm using some bricks to weight these things down while the glue sets. This also finishes up the first 24 panels, and 24 is all you can put on a 60-watt power supply. At least that's all that's recommended. So for the next section, when I start that, I'll be starting the wiring from my second LED driver. So I've got that wire coming up here. And one little trick that I learned is to use painter's tape to hold down the wire. And I think that works better in a lot of cases than the hot glue. Hey guys, it's pretty early here, but I wanted to show you something while it's still dark. After I got this section done, and then I noticed in this corner where I had made a cut, the edge has a nice illumination to it. And that's pretty cool because I also want the edge of the stone where there's this countertop overhang to be illuminated. And I want it to be consistent. And if I don't make some changes, I'm not going to get that effect. I'm going to have to reorient some of the panels. Fortunately, I didn't glue them down with a lot of glue, so it was pretty easy to lift it up. For example, this one here I can rotate. Of course, I got to redo the wiring, which is going to be a little bit tricky. I can do the same thing down here where I started. I think that was well worth the effort. Now I have a nice lighted edge all along the front. I made some good progress here, and now I'm ready to start the final stretch. Heading into this final section, I just wanted to show something that I learned about routing the channels. It's best to make the channels follow the same natural path as the wires. You don't want to have any sharp corners or bends. And in this corner where the wires come out of the panel, since they come out kind of diagonally, it's best to route the channel in the same way. That makes laying the wires a lot easier. Quick test to make sure it works, and a brick to weight it down. Okay, finished all the panels and everything is working perfectly. And just in time, because tomorrow is the day that the countertops are going to be installed, so that's going to be very exciting. I wanted to show you one other detail that I included here. Around the grill, I know there's a lot of heat, but along the edge where the grill sits, I put ceramic tile, and that's going to be a nice insulator between the grill and the LEDs. So it all came together, took a bit of work, for sure, but the end result is definitely going to be worth it. Countertops, it's important to keep the lights on. That way you can spot if any problems occur. It's kind of hard to see it because it's daylight, but it's definitely still working. And that's it. Project is complete. Looks amazing. Everything is working great. And we couldn't be happier. Thanks for watching.